Well, welcome back, everybody, to Between Two Sermons. So great to have you back with us again. It's been a while, Rob.
I know, it has been.
Yeah.
October-ish.
I know. So
Feels
we're back-
longer.
Yeah, we're back at it again, though. So
Glad to be back.
yeah, great to have you alongside of me as we engage in a brand new series that you've put together for us called Words to Live By this time. I don't know. I was just thinking how many times this has been for us. How many seasons of
That's a great
Between
question.
Two Sermons?
I don't know.
Maybe like 5.
I was just thinking five
or
too. I
6.
don't know either, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, and each of them has been about a particular series, and this series is based on the 10 Commandments. And you started last week, and we didn't film a Between Two Sermons on that particular one, but really this week is really launching it, I would say, more in earnest.
Yeah.
And rather than taking one of the commandments this week, you've actually gone and just taken the first 2 verses, the preamble, if you will, before the commands, and have expounded on that for us. And there's so much in there for us.
Right.
I think as we look at it, that's super applicable to us.
I think, it's like any book in the Bible, especially a narrative book like Exodus. There's a lot of story there. There's a lot of history, and then all of a sudden we're in this passage that's about the 10 Commandments, which it's kind of outsized in our imagination. We all know about the 10 Commandments, or many of us know about them, but there's the whole history or the whole earlier 19 chapters really are building up to, and so even in those couple verses, as you say, as I was thinking about it, there's only a few words in verses 1 and 2 of Exodus 20, but there's a lot of history and theology, you might say, or truth. And so it seemed important to slow down and set the tone, because I think many people, I don't know about us, maybe us, we can tend to look at the laws of God, or in this case, the 10 Commandments, as something that's sort of, external, almost like it's a measuring stick, and, I do it or I don't do it, and it's, I'm good or bad, I get a grade, and I don't think that's all, that's not at all the intent.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was flipping through my Instagram Reels this week, and, I don't spend a ton of time on Instagram, but I looked at my Reels, and there was a rabbi who was talking about this very same verses that you're talking about. And he was reflecting on those 2 verses as kind of the way to set up the 10 Commandments. And he actually said they were words to live by. I was
interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that.
you're ahead of the curve, or like in touch with your
it anyway. Nice.
Yeah. And he said in his reflection that I thought really stood out to me was just his view of God as being like this relational God. He is relational, and he wants, before he wants people to know what he is asking of them, he wants them to remember that this is about a relationship that he already has with them. Yeah. And I thought that was a very interesting thing, because it's lining up exactly with what you're saying.
And I think it's so important. I am the Lord your God. That's verse 1, I think, I guess, or maybe that's part of verse 2. And God, it's part of verse 2. But that's, that says a ton. It's like it's like if you said to your son or your daughter, I'm your father. And then you finish the sentence, therefore I love you, or therefore let's go, do this together. So I think your point, or his point, that this is the context of these outsized commands in our lives is a relationship. That's huge. We talk about, having a life-changing relationship with Jesus. We talk about, what it means to have a relationship with God. And that's really what we're talking about. I mean, that's the context of these words. And context matters. If I, there's so many ways to think about it. I could take words I'm reading your mail, or I'm listening to an excerpt of your phone call. If I don't know the context, I can completely understand, right, what you're saying to your friend or to your spouse or whatever. And the context of these, because sometimes these brief commands. You shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. That's the whole command. It sounds so, matter of fact, but I think understanding that it's, in this case, we other want to think, not Father, Son, but God and His people. It matters. It's a big deal.
Yeah. One of the things the other thing that he said that stuck out to me as I'm reflecting on it was the principle that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
this is God's way of saying, just remember how much I care about you, because I led you out of Egypt. I led you out of the bondage that you were in.
That's right.
And I think one of the things that stood out to me the most in what you said in your sermon was the fact that we know God as deliverer or we don't know him.
Yeah.
To me, that's a kind of a drop mic moment.
Yeah.
And I think most of us don't take the time to truly let that sink into our lives.
I mean, I so appreciate you pulling that out. We were talking just before this taping, because that's a great summary of not only, let's say, Exodus 21:2, but you might say of the gospel, right? And you've heard people say this, that the sin behind all sin is pride, and pride is thinking that you're your own, you're all you need, you are your own measure or standard or whatever. And what the Bible's saying to us is, in the truest sense, we are dependent creatures. Of course, we're all sinners, and there's so many great things about God, as we grow as Christians. But at its core, its base, is that He's forgiven us. He's delivered us. And even though it seems like, slavery in Egypt, we all know the story, like an old movie, is this far off distant thing, because you and I don't live in political slavery today. You and I don't. But slavery is an idea. Which means being in bondage to something deeper than just your external life, but the deeper issues of our sin and our separation from God. This is huge, and even Jesus uses these words. And in a sense, there's where the book of Exodus can come alive, and the Ten Commandments can be not an old story, but can be our story.
Right. Right. I mean, even, we just got through the Christmas season, but the fact that the angel announces the name of Jesus as he will save his people from their sins.
That's great.
I mean, it's so familiar to some of us that we forget.
Yeah, it's well said.
That just the deliverance that Jesus brings.
Yes.
And I think both you and me came to Jesus after enough life that we knew like we needed to be forgiven.
Definitely.
Of the stuff that the stuff that was dominating our lives.
That's right.
Apart from him.
Yeah.
And I imagine there's a lot of people either listening who have experienced that, or maybe some who are listening who are this sounds great in theory, John and Rob, but I still feel dominated by this thing or that thing.
That's right, by some kind of struggle or addiction or whatever.
Yeah,
no, I think that's very true.
Yeah, so
which makes me think of we know him as deliverer or we don't know him at all.
Yeah.
Is not just deliver like one time, like I was delivered from on this date.
Yes,
but it's an ongoing deliverance.
Right. Yeah. Because those same things like can come back and into our lives, and we go, oh man, I just fell back into that again, or oh man, I thought I was over that. And we need Jesus as deliverer.
That's right.
All the time.
Right.
So I think that's what makes it fresh to me, is looking at it through that perspective that, man, we need that deliverer.
Yeah.
And if we don't experience God as our deliverer, then we aren't really getting the most out of our relationship.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of putting it. I think, people have heard, just like you say, we some of these things become, we become too familiar for us. But the idea that the gospel is not the beginning of the Christian life. You've heard people say this. It's the beginning and the middle and the totality of the Christian life. In other words, the idea that I am experiencing God's grace and forgiveness at deeper and deeper levels over the course of my life in deeper and deeper places. I might need to be delivered of something today in 2024. I've been a Christian since I was a college student, for something that I didn't even really know was an issue in my life, as well as something that is an issue, that is a longstanding issue. But both could be true.
Totally.
So the idea that we know God is deliverer, or we don't know him at all, is a powerful idea, and can be very practical and meaningful.
Yeah. So what would you say to people who are feeling like, maybe even having a fresh realization of, man, this thing, that thing is really, it's dominating my life, and I don't feel like I can shake it.
Yeah.
Like I whether it's, okay, let's take a few. Like, I just feel like the thing that is weighing me down is anxiety, or the thing that is weighing me down is the opinions of other people, or I have this addiction that I can't shake on my own.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we could both come up with lots of people that we know that fit in those realms, and even ourselves at some level. Some of that stuff rears its ugly head from time to time. So like, what advice do you have for people who are like navigating that reality?
Well, I think it starts with a belief and encouragement that what feels impossible, what feels like, and I felt this way before in my life for sure, there's no hope in this area. So the first thing about the gospel, even before it's a power, it's a truth that says, it's not a pill that we swallow, but that there's real hope in things that feel impossible for us. That's why maybe slavery wasn't only a reality in the case of the Egyptian or the Jews in Egypt, God's people in Egypt, but it's a good metaphor or a good way of understanding the power of sin. It feels like a slavery. Let's say it's drugs, alcohol, pornography, whatever it is. There's many things we could fill in the blank with. People's approval. This can feel like a slavery. It can feel like a bondage. Maybe that's a better word. A bondage that is never going to go away. So one is that the gospel says there is hope. There is. And then two, I think, with the advice I guess I would give to myself and to others is, it's kind of like we were saying a minute ago, even the whole story of Exodus 20, it's about people preparing to meet with God. How can I encourage myself and others to make meeting with God? Because it's really God who, in the person of Christ, of course, for us, but who is able not only to know me better than I know myself, but only he has the resources, to really bring freedom or deliverance. It's not a 3 steps to this or some, clever, way that we get out of things or better ourselves. It really is, deliverance is a good word. So I would say, starting with believing as a Christian that there's hope. The gospel is real hope against the most worst of things that hold us down, what worst kinds of bondage. And then two, maybe as we begin the year, how can we make a commitment to meet with God, okay, whatever that means. It means a number of things, I guess, or it can mean to meet with God more regularly.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's a great way to even frame the beginning of a discussion for a small group as you're doing this. Because I think we experience this at an even deeper level in community, to be able to be honest and open about these things as we share them with others, that frees us as well. And so I would say maybe a great question to talk about with your group is, what do I need to be delivered from? Is there something in my life that maybe I'm still struggling?
Right. No, that's a good question.
And that takes some vulnerability to answer that honestly, but I'd say it's vulnerability that's worth it.
Yeah.
And then maybe a second question. I love what you're saying, like making meeting with God a priority.
Yeah,
Like-
right. Around even that issue.
Right.
Maybe. Yeah.
Like how can I even move forward with meeting with God about this?
I wonder sometimes if it's in my life or in the lives of people is let's say we have sin struggles, but we think we want to come to God like we're coming to the principal.
Right.
And I'm God, thank you for this, and help me be a good neighbor or something, as opposed to I'm desperate and I'm struggling.
Yes.
So maybe one is, to your point, what is an issue or issues I might be struggling with that I feel in bondage to, and then meeting with God. That's what it's about. God, help me with this. God is not shy to hear our confessions or our real needs. That's the point. If he is not our deliverer, if we don't know him as deliverer, we don't know him at all. So maybe that's some good words.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Well, thanks, Rob, for not only preparing that sermon, but for helping us navigate this in our lives. And looking forward to seeing what the Lord does in your life this week and throughout this series as we look at the Ten Commandments in a fresh way. So thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you back here next week on Between Two Sermons.